All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to our latest explainer. Today, we're going to unravel a mind-bending mystery that is literally sitting right under your nose. I want you to take a quick second and look at the objects directly in front of you. Maybe it's your coffee mug, your phone, or the desk you're leaning on. We interact with this stuff every single day, right? We completely take for granted what they actually are. But today, we're putting on our philosophy glasses to decode the absolute fundamental nature of reality itself. We're talking the most basic building blocks of our physical world. It sounds heavy, and okay, yeah, it kind of is, but I promise by the end of this, you are never going to look at a simple piece of furniture the same way again. To give you a quick roadmap, here's how we're going to break this down. First, the mystery of ordinary things. Second, we'll ask, is an object a hidden substrate or just a bundle of properties? Third, the puzzle of properties and universals. Fourth, the solution in Plato's sky. And finally, nominalism and Aristotle's realism. Let's get to it. Part 1. The mystery of ordinary things. Let's peel back that first layer of the philosophical onion, shall we? I want you to ask yourself a deceptively simple question. What exactly is that table in front of you? I mean, obviously, you know it's a table. You use it, you probably spill coffee on it. But metaphysically speaking, when you point and say, this table, what exactly are you referring to? Are you talking about the wood, the rectangular shape, the brown color, or is there something else? Some kind of invisible underlying thingness that makes it a table? Well, here is the absolute kicker about how we perceive the world. Our senses, they reveal color, they reveal texture, but they actually do not reveal the thing itself. Think about it. When you look at the table, your brain is just processing specific data points. You see the brown of the wood, you feel a hard, flat surface, you might even smell the furniture polish, but your senses are only giving you those specific traits. They don't actually tell you what the underlying object truly is. You're experiencing its characteristics, sure, but the core thing itself, it remains somehow totally invisible to your eyes and hands. Wild, right? Moving on to part 2, hidden substrate or bundle of properties. So this whole invisible core problem brings us to a massive debate about what actually happens when we mentally strip an object down. First, let's get our terms straight so we're all speaking the same language. In this realm of metaphysics, actual individual items, like that specific table or your cat or your car, are called particulars. They're the literal things taking up physical space. On the flip side, the traits they possess, like being brown, having 4 legs, being round, those are their properties. Basically, a particular is a carrier of properties. But the million-dollar question is, how exactly does it carry them? Okay, let's try a quick subtraction thought experiment. Imagine mentally stripping away every single property of your table. Take away the brown color, remove the rectangular shape, subtract the physical weight and the solid feel. What is left? Well, one theory argues there is a hidden substrate. This is essentially a bare, invisible core, kind of like a metaphysical pincushion that holds all those properties together. But honestly, that's a bit weird, right? An invisible thing with 0 traits of its own? Because of that, the opposing view is what's called bundle theory. This argues that an object is nothing but a collection of traits. If you strip away the properties, poof, the object completely vanishes. There's no hidden core at all. According to this view, your table is literally just a bundle of brownness, solidity, and table shape all tied up together. Which leads us to part 3, the puzzle of properties and universals. Now, whether you buy into the hidden pincushion idea or the bundle theory, both concepts rely heavily on these things we're calling properties. And if an object is entirely defined by its properties, we really need to zoom out and figure out where the heck these properties actually come from. Think about red tomatoes, green apples, or round coins. You've seen a million round things in your everyday life, but have you ever seen just roundness? Like isolated? Can the pure concept of roundness or redness exist entirely on its own, just floating out there, independent of physical items? Or do these traits absolutely need to be physically attached to an object to exist? And this, my friends, brilliantly illustrates the mind-bending concept of universals. Universals are exactly what they sound like, traits that are universally shared. Think about this for a second. The exact same roundness can be in a coin in your pocket, in the steering wheel of your car, and in a planet a billion light years away, all at the exact same time. Wait, how is it possible for one single thing, a property, to exist in multiple, totally different locations simultaneously all over the universe? It kind of defies the normal laws of physics as we know them, doesn't it? To solve this immense puzzle of where these universals actually live and how they operate, humanity has been debating for literal millennia. And today, we're going to unpack the three major philosophical theories that try to make sense of the whole shebang: the Platonic view, the nominalist view, and the Aristotelian view. Each one offers a wildly different lens on reality.
Let's start with part 4, the solution in Plato's sky.
Our first major theory takes us completely out of the physical world we know. If you look at this famous depiction from Raphael's painting, The School of Athens, you'll see Plato there, literally pointing up to the heavens. Plato argued that pure universals, like perfect roundness or pure redness, exist in a transcendent, perfect, non-physical realm. So, according to him, the physical objects we stumble around with here on Earth, they're just flawed, imperfect copies of those heavenly forms. Think of it like math. 2 + 2 = 4 exists whether humans are thinking about it or not, right? In that same way, Plato believed properties have their own ultimate independent reality way up in the sky. Which brings us to our final section: nominalism and Aristotle's realism. Now, as beautiful and poetic as Plato's idea of a mystical sky realm is, not everyone was on board. This led to two radically different, much more grounded approaches. In stark contrast to Plato, we have the nominalist view. Nominalists basically look at Plato's heavenly forms and go, yeah, no, that is way too complicated. The nominalist argues that properties aren't actual real entities at all. They don't exist in the sky, and they don't exist as hidden things on Earth. Instead, they're merely names, or nomens, that we humans invented just to conveniently group similar things together. So a red apple and a red car just kind of resemble each other, and we invented the word red to describe that resemblance. That's literally it. Just a helpful trick of language. But then we have a really fascinating middle ground, championed by none other than Plato's own star student, Aristotle. The crucial point of Aristotle's realism, which is beautifully captured here by his hand gesturing downward, anchoring his book to the earth, is that universals are very real. He absolutely agreed with Plato on that part. But he strongly disagreed on where they actually live. Aristotle argued they exist strictly within the physical objects themselves, right here in front of us. There is no magical sky realm. Roundness is for sure a real thing, but it only exists inside the actual round coins and round wheels that physically make up our universe. When you put these two side by side, it creates this incredible visual synthesis. This metaphor pits Plato's heavenly forms against Aristotle's firmly planted feet, perfectly summarizing this epic, age-old battle over the very nature of reality itself. Look really closely at their hands. Plato points up to the abstract, basically saying reality is out there. Meanwhile, Aristotle places his hand flat, feet firmly on the ground, arguing, no, reality is right here in the physical objects we can actually touch. It is the ultimate debate. Is the true essence of a table found in some perfect cosmic blueprint, or is it grounded entirely in the actual wood and nails sitting right in front of you? To wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with a genuinely mind-bending question to chew on. Imagine someone went on an incredibly thorough rampage and completely crushed every single round object in the entire universe. Every coin, every wheel, every planet just completely smashed flat. If every physical instance is destroyed, does the property of roundness itself actually survive? Well, a Platonist would say yes, it's totally safe up in heaven. An Aristotelian would say, no way, it dies right alongside the physical objects. And a nominalist? They'd say you just destroyed our whole reason for using the word in the first place. So if the universe was wiped clean of every physical shape, what happens to the blueprint? Think about that the next time you sit down at an ordinary table. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep questioning the reality around you. Welcome to today's explainer. We are jumping right in to unpack a really fundamental mystery of our universe. It's actually a puzzle you interact with every single day, probably without even realizing it. I mean, we look around and see a world absolutely full of objects, right? Tables, chairs, cars, animals, and, well, ourselves. But if we zoom in close enough, we know everything is basically just a collection of much smaller pieces, like atoms, molecules, and cells. Actually, here's a fun fact to put things into perspective. Mathematically speaking, the human body is only worth about $160 in basic elements. You know, a little carbon, some oxygen, hydrogen, a handful of minerals. But obviously, you are priceless. So the ultimate question we're tackling today is this: is everything we see, including you and me, simply a collection of tiny Lego-like building blocks? Or is there something more magical happening when all those blocks finally come together? Let's explore this. So is the whole merely the sum of its parts? Think about the everyday act of taking something apart. When you completely dismantle an object, what exactly happens to it? Does it simply become a messy, disorganized version of what it was, or does it lose something absolutely fundamental? Throughout this explainer, we're going to run through some brilliant mental exercises to look at the relationship between the tiny pieces that make up our world and the larger entities those pieces end up creating. Honestly, the way you answer this single question fundamentally changes how you view reality, life, and even your own consciousness. Okay, let's dive into this. If I walk up to a simple pile of stones and take away one or, hey, even 10 of them, it's really still just a pile of stones, just a slightly smaller one. Its core identity remains completely intact. But what about something like a complex smartphone? If we separate the battery, the glass screen, the microchips, and literally spread them all out on a table, do you still have a phone? Well, no. It completely loses its identity, its function, and its purpose. It just becomes this useless collection of parts. It's definitely not checking emails or playing music anymore. The specific arrangement really matters. Picture this. You have a few distinct, separate parts enclosed within a larger boundary. Do those internal pieces exist independently, or are their identities entirely dictated by the boundary that encloses them? When parts come together to form a highly specific arrangement, kind of like the components of that smartphone we just talked about, does the whole become a completely new, distinct entity that rules over the parts? Well, this brings us to our first major philosophical school of thought. Section 1. The reductionist worldview, breaking reality down. Reductionism is the philosophical belief that any complex whole can be entirely explained by, and completely reduced down to, its fundamental individual parts. So the crucial takeaway here is that if you want to understand a really complex system, you don't look at the system itself. No, you take it apart. You look at the smallest possible components. A strict reductionist believes there is absolutely zero magic in the whole. The whole is really just a convenient label we slap onto a highly organized collection of parts. If you understand the micro, you automatically understand the macro. We can actually map this out as an inverted pyramid of the sciences. At the very bottom, the foundation, is physics. Physics deals with the most fundamental particles and laws of the universe, and reductionists argue that absolutely everything rests on this. Move up a step and you hit chemistry, which, if you think about it, is really just applied physics, right? It's just how those fundamental particles interact. Then comes biology, which is just incredibly complex chemistry. And finally, at the top, you have psychology and sociology, which are ultimately just complex biology driven by chemical reactions firing off in the brain. In this view, every single thing in the universe can eventually be traced straight downwards and perfectly explained by the foundational laws of physics. If you know the parts, you know the whole. This simple phrase beautifully summarizes the ultimate promise of the reductionist worldview, and it's an incredibly powerful idea. It suggests that the universe is basically this giant, intricate clockwork mechanism. If we can just map out every single gear, every spring, every tiny atom, and exactly how they push against each other, scientists hope we will eventually be able to explain every single mystery in existence. Nothing is beyond our grasp, provided we can just zoom in close enough to observe the foundational parts at play. It's a really comforting, highly structured way to look at reality. Section 2. The puzzle of consciousness and life, where the pyramid cracks. Now, as neat and tidy as that inverted pyramid of reductionism is, there's a massive plot twist in our story where it seems to completely hit a brick wall. Consider a simple wooden table. A reductionist looks at it and says, 4 wooden legs, a flat wooden top, held together by nails. Understanding the parts gives us a 100% complete understanding of the table. But what about a living organism? Say, a rat, or even a human being? If we physically dissect that rat into its component parts, the heart, the lungs, the blood, the bones, we don't just dismantle it, we completely destroy the life that made it a functioning creature. You can't just stitch those exact same parts back together and get a living, breathing creature again. The parts alone just do not seem to account for the living, animated whole. Let's break down the limits of this worldview a bit further. Think about the feeling of a sharp pain, or the deeply subjective experience of seeing the vivid color red. Where exactly do those things exist? If you look at the fundamental particles that make up a human, the atoms, the neurons, the electrical signals, literally none of those individual parts possess pain. None of those single atoms have redness or consciousness. These complex phenomena simply do not exist at the microscopic level. You can map every single atom in a person's entire body, but you are never going to find their memories, their sense of humor, or that intangible essence of them being alive. And this brilliantly illustrates our next problem. How can the brain produce consciousness? I mean, when you really think about it, the brain is ultimately just a wet, physical collection of meat, blood, and chemical electricity. So how does a physical arrangement of flesh create an intangible thought, a deep emotion, or a complex philosophical idea? If reductionism is entirely true, your mind is literally nothing but an illusion created by atoms bumping into each other in the dark. But for many thinkers, that explanation just falls drastically short. The jump from plain physical matter to rich conscious experience is just way too massive to be explained merely by adding up the pieces. Section 3. The Philosophy of Emergentism, a New Level of Reality. Because reductionism struggles so heavily with this puzzle of consciousness and life, an entirely different, deeply fascinating worldview steps into the spotlight. It's called emergentism. This philosophy argues that at a certain level of complexity, entirely new properties emerge that the individual parts absolutely do not possess. This is a total game changer. Emergentism basically says that the whole is not just a pile of parts. When parts are arranged in a highly specific, complex way, they unlock a completely new level of reality. The whole becomes a brand new entity with its own unique powers and rules that you simply cannot find by looking backward at the base components. New properties emerge that cannot be found at the level of the parts. That quote right there is the core idea. Let's relate this back to our earlier examples to really nail it down. When you perfectly arrange the glass, silicon, and battery of a smartphone, the ability to connect to the internet suddenly emerges. The silicon can't do that on its own. The battery sure can't do that. Only the highly structured whole can do that. Similarly, when biological cells arrange themselves into the unfathomably complex structure of a human brain, consciousness emerges. The parts don't have it, but the whole absolutely does. The specific arrangement unlocks the magic. This perfectly represents the core tension between our two philosophical camps. A bottom-up approach, which is reductionism, states that the parts are the ultimate bosses. They dictate absolutely everything the whole does. But a top-down approach, which is emergentism, flips the script entirely. It argues that once the whole emerges, it actually takes control and dictates the behavior of the parts. Think about it. Your conscious mind, which is the whole, can decide right now to raise your arm, forcing billions of physical atoms, the parts, to move on command. The whole is actively directing the parts. Which brings us to a final, deeply provocative question. Are you just a collection of atoms, or are you something fundamentally greater? Go ahead, look at your own hands right now. Think about the mind you are using at this exact moment to understand my words. Are you merely a walking, talking pile of microscopic Legos, fully explainable by the cold laws of physics? Or are you a magnificent emergent entity, possessing completely unique properties of life and consciousness that make you vastly more than just the sum of your parts? I'm going to leave you to ponder which philosophy rings true for your own existence. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time. Welcome to This Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled you're here with us today. We're going to dive right into a really fascinating investigation into the unseen philosophical rules that govern our everyday reality. I mean, take a second and think about the chair you're sitting on or the device you're holding right now. We walk through the world entirely surrounded by mundane objects and events, and we rarely stop to consider the profound metaphysical machinery operating just beneath the surface, holding the whole shebang together. But today we're going to look a little closer. We're going to explore the invisible architecture of reality itself. Okay, let's dive into this. So, if an object constantly changes, is it still the exact same object? It sounds like a pretty simple riddle, right? But it actually unlocks one of the deepest mysteries in philosophy. Let's say you've got a brown wooden table in your room. One weekend, you decide to paint it white to better match your decor. It looks completely different now. Visually, its qualities have completely transformed. But is it numerically the exact same table? Now, most of us would intuitively say, well, yeah, of course, it's my table. I just painted it. But the moment we separate the superficial qualities of an object from the object itself, we invite this massive intellectual complication. Because what actually makes the table the table? So, here's our roadmap for today. Number 1, the mystery of change and identity. Number 2, endurance versus temporal parts. Number 3, the search for the cause. Number 4, David Hume and constant conjunction. And finally, number 5, the power of hidden causes. All right, section 1, the mystery of change and identity, qualitative change versus numerical identity. So, going back to our painted table for just a moment, that was what we'd call a mild qualitative change, an object changing a superficial quality, like its color, while somehow remaining numerically identical, one continuous thing. But let's look at a much more extreme example from the natural world to see just how far we can push this concept before it breaks down completely.
Imagine a caterpillar entering the chrysalis phase. What happens to a living organism when it completely restructures its physical form? When a caterpillar enters this stage, it essentially dissolves and completely rebuilds itself.
Just look at how radical this transformation actually is. We are looking at an organism morphing so profoundly that almost none of its original physical characteristics remain. I mean, it loses its old properties and gains entirely new ones. And this raises a massive complication. How can it possibly remain the exact same numerical entity when virtually every single quality it possesses is now totally different? And then bam, here is the final emergence, the completely transformed butterfly. It flies, it has wings, it operates on entirely different biological mechanisms. If an object is literally just a collection of its properties, then shedding all of its old properties and gaining new ones should, technically speaking, mean a brand new object has been created. The profound problem of change is how contradictory properties, like being a crawling leaf-eating caterpillar at one point and a flying nectar-drinking butterfly at another, can somehow exist within one single enduring object over time. I mean, if you listed out the properties of a caterpillar and the properties of a butterfly, they'd look like two completely different animals on paper. How can they mathematically be one thing? Moving right along, Section 2, Endurance versus Temporal Parts, two competing metaphysical theories. Now, philosophers couldn't just leave this paradox unsolved, right? So they developed two competing metaphysical theories to try and explain how objects actually survive change. On one side, we've got endurance theory. This is basically our intuitive, everyday view of the world. It argues that an object remains fully and completely present at every single moment of its existence. The whole table or the whole butterfly is entirely there at any given second. But over on the other side, we have this really radical alternative, the theory of temporal parts. This theory argues that objects are actually not fully present at any one moment, but rather they exist as a sequence of connected time slices. Think of a time slice as a 3D snapshot of an object frozen in a single solitary instant of time. To really wrap our heads around this temporal parts theory, let's lean into a cinematic analogy. Think about how an old-school film strip works. You've got individual, static frames. In any single frame, nothing is moving, nothing is changing. But when you play them in rapid, chronological succession, our minds perceive it as fluid movement. Well, the theory of temporal parts views an object's existence exactly like this. You are not one fluid entity. You are an incredibly dense sequence of distinct temporal segments stacked one after another, creating the illusion of a continuous changing whole. So let's evaluate this philosophical tension for a second. If the temporal parts theory is actually true and the world is fragmented into these static temporal parts, then true fluid change, it might literally just be an illusion. You're just a sequence of slightly different unmoving slices. But on the flip side, if we stick to the endurance theory, we're stuck trying to explain how a single enduring object can hold totally contradictory properties over its lifetime. How do the pieces actually connect? Are the transitions seamless, or are we just hopping from one temporal reality to the next? It kind of forces us to look at the continuous flow of our own lives in a totally new way. Are you moving fluidly through time, or is time just projecting different static versions of you, one after another? All right, on to Section 3, the search for the cause. From objects to events. Now, we're going to pivot our investigation a bit, away from objects and focus instead on how events interact. If things change, what actually drives that change? To anchor this rather abstract concept of causation, let's look at a classic, totally tangible philosophical trope, billiard balls colliding on a pool table. When you see a cue ball strike an 8-ball and the 8-ball rolls away, you instantly assume the first ball caused the second one to move. It's just common sense, right? One event forces the next event to happen. We expect it with absolute certainty. But the deeper we dig into this, the more elusive that invisible force actually becomes. Which leads us to Section 4, David Hume and constant conjunction, the radical skepticism of cause. This brings us to a really radical climax in our causal dilemma, courtesy of the philosopher David Hume. Hume introduced a level of profound skepticism that completely shook the foundations of metaphysics. He asked this brilliant, super disruptive question: do we ever actually see a true cause? He introduced a concept called constant conjunction. It's basically the idea that we only ever witness event A followed by event B. We see a sequence, but we do not see a visible causal force. Because event B always follows event A, our brains develop a mental habit of expecting it. But here's the kicker. A habit in your mind is not definitive proof of a driving physical force out there in the real world. Let's apply Hume's logic right back to those billiard balls. You see the white ball moving. Okay, that's an event. Then you hear a click. That's another event.
Then you see the striped ball move, a third event. Hume points out that you never, ever actually observe the invisible power transferring from one ball to the next. You simply observe a sequence of events, and out of sheer habit, you stitch them together and call it causation. You're trusting a psychological expectation, not actual physical proof. Mind-bending, right?
And our final section, Section 5, the power of hidden causes, real forces in nature. Now, Hume's skepticism is notoriously hard to completely disprove, but it makes a lot of people deeply uncomfortable. It shifts us to the opposing and, honestly, perhaps more intuitive view, which perfectly illustrates the fundamental split in metaphysical thought regarding events. So on the left, we have constant conjunction. Causation is just a cosmic habit, a series of sequential events that have zero genuine power over each other. But on the right, we have causal powers, the belief that real, hidden forces actually exist within objects, allowing them to produce distinct effects. The universe is actually governed by real, albeit invisible forces. A lot of thinkers firmly argue the case for causal powers because, well, it's just the most practical way to navigate, predict, and survive in our reality. Think about medicine for a second. If someone takes a pill and is cured of an illness, we desperately need to know that the pill possessed the actual causal power to fight the disease. We need to know it wasn't just that taking the pill and getting better are a habit of sequential events. We have to push past mere visual observation. Objects absolutely must possess real internal properties capable of producing effects. Because if that medicine has no real internal properties, no actual causal powers, then modern science is kind of an illusion. We must believe the universe is built on a foundation stronger than just random, unconnected coincidences.
And that brings us to the end of our intellectual journey today. We've explored how objects endure through radical, crazy changes, and we've debated whether the events driving those changes are powered by real forces or if they are just mere habitual sequences. So, as you go about your day today, I really want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Look around you. As you watch a door close or a car start or even just a leaf fall to the ground, are you observing real hidden forces at play, or are you just witnessing a cosmic habit? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep questioning the reality around you. Welcome, everyone. In today's analysis, we are about to embark on a completely mind-bending exploration of something you experience every single second of your life, yet might totally misunderstand. We're talking about the fundamental nature of time.
Think about it for a second. Does time really pass? I mean, it certainly feels like it does, right? We feel the seconds ticking away, we feel the past slipping behind us into our memories, and the future just rushing straight toward us. It's honestly the most intuitive, everyday experience we have as humans. But today, we aren't going to completely dismantle that everyday assumption and look at what reality might actually be.
Okay, let's dive into this. Consider the most familiar measurement of passing time, a clock. We use it to map out our entire days, just ticking away the hours. It gives us this really profound sense of a continuous moving current. But what if that ticking is just an illusion we've created? What if time isn't actually what that clock implies at all?
To unpack this, here is our philosophical roadmap for today's explainer. Number 1, the familiar illusion time's river. 2, presentism, nothing but now. 3, the growing block time theory. 4, eternalism, the static universe. And finally, number 5, does time really pass? Section 1, the familiar illusion, time's river. So most of us naturally visualize time flowing continuously, kind of like a river. You're on a boat, the river carries you past the shores of your childhood, it pushes you through the present, and searches onward toward your future. But here is exactly where that flowing river metaphor completely breaks down. If time flows, does it have a speed? Think about how we measure the speed of literally anything else flowing, like water or a moving car. We measure it against time, right? Miles per hour, meters per second. So if time itself is moving, at what speed is it moving? 1 second per second? I mean, that's logically absurd. It's a completely circular statement that doesn't actually mean anything. This one simple question tells us that treating time as a flowing physical current might just be fundamentally flawed. Section 2, presentism, nothing but now. So the crucial point is, if the whole river metaphor is broken, what do we replace it with? Well, in the theory of presentism, only the present is real. The past and future simply do not exist. Imagine reality as a brief, super fleeting flash of light in a pitch-black room. Whatever is illuminated in that tiny microsecond of now is absolutely all there is. The year 1961? Entirely gone. Wiped from existence. The year 2050? Not here yet. There is literally nothing but the current moment.
Now, that sounds pretty intuitive, right? But science actually has a massive problem with this theory, and it's beautifully summarized by the number 8. According to physics, it takes light from the sun approximately 8 minutes to reach us here on Earth. So when you look up at the sky, you aren't seeing the sun now, you're seeing the sun exactly as it existed 8 minutes ago.
And this leads us to a profound universe-breaking question. If absolute simultaneity is an illusion, what exactly is the present? Albert Einstein's theory of relativity pretty much demolished the idea of a single universal clock ticking away for everyone, everywhere. If a star explodes millions of light years away, your now and that star's now are completely disconnected from each other. And if the universe doesn't share a single universal now, the entire foundation of presentism gets incredibly shaky. Whose present is actually the real one?
Plus, presentism struggles heavily with our most basic understanding of truth. Think about major historical anchors: Julius Caesar's existence, the reality of World War II, Abraham Lincoln's assassination. If only the exact present moment is real, then these monumental historical events aren't real facts anymore, because the past literally holds no reality. But to claim that World War II isn't a part of reality completely conflicts with our deep, everyday sense that the past leaves a permanent mark on the present. We really need a theory that saves the past.
Section 3. The growing block time theory. The growing block theory is a really elegant attempt by philosophers to fix those glaring holes in presentism. It tries to save reality by bringing the past back into it, while keeping the future completely open. It basically argues that the past and present are real and fixed, while the future just doesn't exist yet. Imagine reality not as a quick flash of light, but as a giant solid block of existence. And as time happens, new layers are just constantly added on top. The block just keeps getting taller and thicker. And this brilliantly illustrates how the past is safely preserved underneath. Step 1, Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon is an event that becomes deeply fixed near the bottom of our block. It's real, it's there, it's unquestionable. Step 2, the current moment, like you taking in this explainer right now, is simply being added as the very top layer. So the past is safe, and the present is just the leading edge of a growing reality. But honestly, even this theory struggles with the whole physics of relativity we talked about earlier. I mean, what defines that perfectly flat top layer if time is totally relative to the observer?
Section 4. Eternalism, the static universe.
Which forces us into arguably the most paradigm-shifting model of all, eternalism. This model completely abandons the idea of a flowing present or some growing top edge. In eternalism, the past, the present, and the future are all equally real, and they exist simultaneously in a giant static block universe. Reality isn't growing at all. It's a completed, permanent structure. The future is already there waiting, and the past literally never left. Think of time not as a movie playing out, but as a map or a landscape. In this block universe, the timeline is just a set of fixed coordinates. 1865, Abraham Lincoln's assassination. 1961, Barack Obama's birth. These events are fixed, equally real, permanent points in the block. The only relationship they have is that one is older than or newer than the other. It's exactly the same way New York is further east than Los Angeles. The events aren't passing at all. They just perfectly, permanently are. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we can directly contrast these two extreme opposite views of reality. Over on the left side, you've got presentism. You're just balancing on this tiny razor's edge of now, surrounded entirely by the void of nothingness. And on the right side, eternalism. Everything that has ever happened or ever will happen exists permanently. If eternalism is true, the dinosaurs are literally still out there, existing in their specific temporal location, every bit as real as you are right now. No way, right?
Section 5. Does time really pass?
Let's move to and see how this builds a completely new understanding for us. If eternalism actually holds the key here, then time might just be an organized sequence of events rather than a moving current. Time doesn't flow at all. Things are simply related by being before or after one another. And that incredibly powerful sensation you have of time passing? Well, that might just be the way our biological brains are forced to process a static, four-dimensional universe. We just experience it frame by frame, even though the whole reel of film already exists in its entirety. And, depending on which of these massive paradigms we adopt, the ultimate shape of time itself changes drastically. If time is just a sequence, maybe it's an infinite straight line going on forever. Or perhaps it's a finite resource with a definitive start, like the Big Bang, and an eventual end. Some theories even suggest branching paths of alternative possibilities, creating multiple realities like a massive growing tree. Or, perhaps most incredibly, time could be a recurring circle, where the end of the universe feeds right back into the beginning in this one continuous loop. So, I want to leave you with this final, lingering thought to really deeply question your own moment-to-moment experience of reality. Is the flow of time just an illusion created by human perspective? The next time you look down at a watch or see a clock on the wall, ask yourself, is time actually passing you by, or are you simply moving your awareness through an eternal, unchanging block of existence? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning what you think you know. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into one of the most brain-bending metaphysical mysteries out there. We're going to strip away all those everyday assumptions you have about your life and ask a surprisingly tough question. What exactly makes you, you? It sounds super simple at first, right? But I promise, by the end of this, you're going to look at your reflection in the mirror a whole lot differently. We'll be looking at classic philosophical debates, physical realities, and even a completely wild sci-fi thought experiment to really get to the bottom of personal identity. Okay, let's dive into this. Are you genuinely the exact same person you were 10 years ago? Your gut instinct is probably to just say, well, yeah, obviously. But let's actually challenge that baseline assumption for a second. Biologically speaking, your physical body is literally constantly shedding dead skin cells and regenerating over time. Think about it like a car. If you replace the spark plugs, it's still your car, right? But what if every single piece is replaced over a decade? Your body is in this constant state of flux, tossing out the old material and bringing in the new. So if the physical matter making up your body today is dramatically different from the matter that made up your body when you were a kid, what's the anchor? What exactly keeps you, you? To answer that, we first need to figure out what a person actually is. And philosophers tell us it's about being capable of complex thought, experiencing diverse feelings, retaining personal memories, and being held morally accountable for your actions. See, it goes way beyond just being a biological human. What separates us from, say, a wooden table? A table persists through time, sure, but it doesn't have a mind. If a highly intelligent animal or an advanced AI hit all these bullet points, philosophers argue we might actually have to consider them a person too. So if being a person is all about the mind, how does that mind actually connect to your physical body? Well, that brings us to a massively influential theory from 1641 proposed by René Descartes. He looked at this divide and came up with what we call substance dualism. He was incredibly enthusiastic about the idea that humans aren't just one single thing. Instead, we're made of two fundamentally distinct, completely different substances. On the one hand, you've got your physical body, but on the other hand, you have this immaterial thinking mind or soul. For Descartes, this immaterial mind is what truly matters. It's the absolute core of your identity, and he even believed it could exist entirely beyond the physical body after you pass away. Let's look at the intense conceptual contrast in how Descartes divided up reality. Think about the body. It's physical matter. It has actual dimensions, height, length, width. It's solid. It takes up a specific spatial location, and you can't just pass through it. But then think about the mind. Descartes argued the mind is completely unextended. It has absolutely zero physical dimensions. It takes up no space whatsoever, it doesn't have a location, and it's almost transparent, kind of like a ghost. It is purely a thinking substance. I mean, you can't measure a thought with a ruler, right? But here is where Descartes' elegant theory runs headfirst into a massive, almost insurmountable brick wall. We call it the interaction problem. If the mind is truly this completely non-spatial, zero-dimension ghost, how on earth does a ghost move a solid object? Think about it. If you kick a football, physical mass is transferring energy to physical mass. But if your mind has absolutely no physical mass, how can it possibly reach out and push your solid, heavy body to do anything? How can something with zero physical substance interact with something entirely made of physical substance? Think about the last time you felt really, truly embarrassed. What happened? Your face probably turned bright red, right? This is actually the perfect real-world example of the interaction problem. We call it the blushing paradox. How does an abstract, completely non-physical feeling like embarrassment or shame somehow reach into the biological machinery of your body and literally force physical blood to rush to your cheeks? Or think about pain. You touch a hot stove. How does that physical damage translate into the non-physical sensation of pain, which then magically causes the non-physical mind to tell your physical leg muscles to run away? If the mind and body are entirely separate substances, like Descartes claimed, this everyday interaction seems literally impossible.
Because of this glaring mind-body interaction problem, later thinkers tried a totally different route. Let's step away from physical forms entirely. In 1690, the philosopher John Locke proposed a brilliant alternative solution that focused purely on the mind itself. He called it psychological continuity. Locke argued that we should just stop worrying about what physical substance we're made of. Instead, he claimed that your personal identity over time is founded strictly on continuous consciousness and your specific chain of memories.
So the crucial point here is the memory link. The physical body replaces parts constantly, but identity easily survives that physical change because an unbroken chain of memories links your past to your present. Basically, you are you simply because you remember your past self. Locke's logic elegantly bypasses the whole shifting nature of our bodies. You are definitively the exact same person who was a misbehaving kid in school all those years ago, strictly because you actually remember being that past self. As long as that memory link holds up, you are you. But it's time to put John Locke's incredibly neat psychological theory to the ultimate test. We're going to pivot from 17th century philosophy into a bizarre but super effective science fiction thought experiment. Because if memory truly equals identity, what happens when we mess with those memories using hypothetical technology? Prepare yourselves, because this scenario is going to thoroughly shatter the comfort of Locke's tidy little theory. Let's use a classic example. Imagine the universe of Star Trek. Captain Kirk steps onto the transporter pad, ready to be beamed down to a planet. The operator, Scotty, stands at the console and initiates the sequence. The machine scans Kirk's physical body and his entire brain state down to the very last atom. The plan is to destroy the original body and perfectly rebuild it on the planet below. But suddenly, Scotty looks at his console and realizes something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. The machine has completely malfunctioned. Here is the paradox. The machine actually successfully built the perfect duplicate of Captain Kirk at the destination. It copied every single physical cell, every firing neuron, and completely duplicated his exact brain state and every single memory he's ever had. But the terrifying existential dilemma is this. The machine failed to terminate the first Kirk on the transporter pad. The original Kirk is still standing there, completely intact, and a perfect duplicate is standing on the planet below. This means two separate Captain Kirks now exist simultaneously in the universe. Just imagine the climax of the scenario. Both copies of Captain Kirk survive the ordeal. They're brought into the exact same room. They lock eyes. The Kirk from the transporter pad says, "I am the real Kirk." And the Kirk from the planet points right back and legitimately argues, "No way, I am Kirk. I remember stepping onto the pad just a second ago." Both of them possess absolute 100% conviction. And psychologically speaking, neither of them is lying. And this brilliantly illustrates our identity crisis. Both Kirks possess absolutely identical past memories. Both feel perfectly continuous with the original Kirk. Locke's theory says memory equals identity, but one person cannot numerically be two people. Locke's theory completely collapses here. By his own rule, both of these men are the one true Captain Kirk, but logically and mathematically, that is completely impossible. One single person cannot be two distinct people standing in a room arguing with each other. So identity can't simply be our memories, if our memories can just be perfectly copied into a second physical body. Which brings us to our final lingering question. If a machine could hypothetically duplicate your memories, your brain state, and your entire mind, which one of the resulting beings is the real you? Is it the one with the original physical matter? Or does the physical matter not matter at all? We started by asking what makes you the same person you were 10 years ago. We've seen that the dualism of mind and body is fraught with impossibilities, and the continuity of memory totally falls apart the second we introduce a duplicate. So I leave you staring at this unsolvable paradox. Are you truly just your memories? Or is personal identity a much deeper, far more mysterious phenomenon that we've yet to truly uncover? Thanks for exploring this with me today. Keep questioning and keep thinking. Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, I am absolutely thrilled you're here because today we're going on a seriously mind-bending journey. We're going to scale all the way from infinite alternate realities, places filled with limitless possibilities, right down to the unseen, invisible voids hiding in our everyday lives. It sounds like pure science fiction, I know, but this is actually rigorous philosophy. if you've ever caught yourself daydreaming about the fundamental nature of reality, or, I don't know, wondering if the empty space in a room is actually a physical thing, well, you are in exactly the right place. So get comfortable and let's explore the unseen fabric of existence. So let me just throw a really simple question at you. What if the Eiffel Tower was exactly 350 meters tall? Now, obviously, we all know it isn't, but you can picture it, right? Or think about history for a second. What if Abraham Lincoln had actually survived his assassination? Or closer to home, what if you had decided to become a professional soccer player instead of whatever it is you're doing right now? We talk about these kinds of unactualized possibilities literally all the time. We constantly say things could have been differently. But here's the massive philosophical puzzle we need to crack today. When we talk about these possibilities, what in the world are we actually talking about? Are these just fictional daydreams floating around in our heads? Or do these possibilities actually have some sort of real, tangible, physical existence? Moving into Section 1, Parallel Realms and the Concept of Extreme Realism. All right. Let's dive right into this, because this first major philosophical concept takes our question and answers it incredibly literally. It's a theory that completely redefines what we mean when we use the word reality. We're talking about the theory of concrete possible worlds. This was famously championed by the philosopher David Lewis, and the really key word to focus on here is concrete. Lewis wasn't just saying that alternate possibilities are fun ideas. No, he argued that every single what-if out there isn't just a concept. It's an actual, physical, flesh and blood universe. Like, if it is logically possible for the Eiffel Tower to be 350 meters tall, there is a literal, concrete world out there where it is exactly that height. If it's possible you wore a green shirt today instead of a blue one, well, there's a universe where a physical, living, breathing you is wearing that green shirt right now. These worlds are just as real, just as solid, and just as full of people, planets, and chairs as ours is. The only catch? They're completely isolated from us in space and time, so there's absolutely no way to ever travel to them. So, the absolutely crucial point here is how we define the word actual. Because if all these infinite worlds are physically real, what makes our world so special, right? Why is ours the actual world? Well, under this theory of extreme realism, actual doesn't mean more real. Actual is really just an indexical term. Think about the words here or I. When I say here, it just means the place I'm currently standing. To someone in London, here means London. To someone in Tokyo, here means Tokyo. According to Lewis's theory, the actual world just means the universe we happen to live in. To the physical people living in a possible world where Lincoln survived, their world is the actual one, and ours is just a possible world to them. I mean, wow. It is a staggeringly huge way to view reality, basically inflating existence to an infinite number of universes. Which brings us to Section 2, the logical combinatorial theory, a framework of mental rearrangements. Now, as utterly fascinating as infinite physical universes are, a lot of philosophers felt that was just way too extravagant. I mean, it kind of feels like we're creating an infinite amount of physical reality just to explain a simple what-if scenario. So let's pivot to our next framework, which is a much more grounded mental exercise. This is the combinatorial theory of possibilities. Now, this framework completely rejects the need for infinite, literal universes. Instead, it argues that possibilities are really just our minds taking the existing building blocks of our own world and shuffling them around. You see, the world is made of particulars, like a specific dog or a specific cat, and properties, like the color black or the color white. A possibility isn't some magical other universe floating out there. It's just a mental grid where we mathematically mix and match these known properties and particulars. The whole process works in a few really simple steps. Step 1, you look at the real world and you observe existing particulars. Let's say you see a black dog and you see a white cat. Step 2, your brain registers the existing properties from what you just saw, the property of being black and the property of being white. And then step 3, you mentally combine them. Even if you've literally never seen a white dog in your entire life, you can easily imagine one just by combining the dog particular with the white property. See? You're just remixing reality. You really don't need a massive physical parallel universe just to explain how you can imagine a white dog. Your mind is essentially acting like a giant grid, just ticking a box where a specific object meets a specific property. It is such a brilliant, economical way to explain possibilities without completely breaking the laws of physics. That leads into Section 3, the enigma of nothingness. Okay, so we've swung the pendulum all the way to maximum reality. Infinite physical worlds and endless combinations of properties. But what happens if we take that philosophical pendulum and swing it in the exact opposite direction? We really have to ask, is a hole in a piece of cheese a real thing? It sounds kind of absurd when you say it out loud, right? But seriously, think about it.
If you have a block of Swiss cheese, the cheese itself is obviously real. But what about the hole? Is the hole an actual physical entity that the cheese surrounds? Like, can you touch it? By definition, a hole is just the boundary where the cheese ends. It's literally empty space. It is an absence. And yet, we name it, we count it, and we talk about it as if it's an actual object. This whole idea brings up a massive, massive debate. Do absences, margins, and voids actually exist, or are we just playing mind games with ourselves?
And this perfectly illustrates how our minds process the world around us. There's a super famous philosophical thought experiment about looking for a friend, let's call him Pierre, in a cafe. You walk into the cafe, you look around and you say, Pierre is absent. But hold on, did you actually see his absence? No, of course not. You saw chairs, you saw tables, you saw other people drinking coffee. You inferred his absence because you expected him to be there, and, well, your expectation wasn't met. Absence isn't some physical, transparent ghost sitting in a chair. It's honestly just a trick of language. It's our human way of vocalizing a negative fact about the world, rather than pointing to some physical nothingness.
Moving to our final part, Section 4, does absence have causal power? Now here is where this gets incredibly practical and honestly pretty controversial. If nothingness is really just a trick of language and it doesn't actually exist, can it cause things to happen? Let's take a look at these dying plants with their dried, wilted leaves. If I asked you what killed these plants, you'd almost certainly say, well, the absence of water. And hey, that makes perfect sense in normal, everyday conversation. But from a strict, rigorous philosophical standpoint, how can nothing, literally the non-existent water, cause something to happen? Think about it. If causality requires a physical force interacting with another physical force, how can a void, a lack, a literal non-entity exert a physical force strong enough to kill a plant? And yet, we do this all the time. We so casually treat a lack of something as having very real-world, tangible physical consequences. For example, we say the absence of oxygen causes asphyxiation. There's that classic proverb that says a lack of a horseshoe nail causes the loss of an entire horse. Over in engineering, a missing ball bearing in a sensor can completely cause an airbag to fail to deploy during a car crash. In all of these cases, we point the finger right at the nothingness as the culprit. But if we grant nothingness actual causal power, if we elevate a void to the same status as a physical force, we run into an absolute logical nightmare. Consider this historical thought experiment. It really highlights the problem. Step 1, a bullet is fired, and it physically kills a president. Okay, that is direct physical causation. Makes sense? Step 2, someone argues, well, the bodyguard failed to jump in the way. So the absence of the bodyguard's physical interference actually caused the death. Okay, well, if we accept that an absence is a cause, let's move right on to step 3. Could you have jumped in the way to stop the bullet? Technically, yes, you could have. So did your absence cause the president's death? Should you be arrested for it? What about my absence? What about the absence of an impenetrable brick wall magically appearing out of thin air? You see, if we give causal power to things that don't happen, the variables literally multiply into infinity. Suddenly, billions of absent things are the cause of every single event that ever happens. It just becomes sheer absurdity.
So to avoid that massive headache, we might just have to accept that absences don't cause anything. Only positive existing things have actual causal power. That plant died because of the biological processes happening inside its cells, not because of some magical, invisible force of absent water. Which brings us to one final, lingering thought to leave you with. Is the empty space in your pocket actually something, or is it just a clever trick of language? From infinite concrete realities housing literally every possibility, to the fierce debate over whether the empty holes in our world even exist, philosophy really forces us to question the very fabric of what we consider real. Next time you look at an empty room, or just catch yourself imagining how your life could have been different, remember, you are actively engaging in some of the most profound metaphysical debates in human history. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this structured journey sparked your curiosity, and I will see you in the next one.